Most people wake up every morning believing a quiet lie. They believe that one day something will arrive and change everything. A perfect idea. A clear sign. A moment so powerful that doubt disappears forever. That day never comes. And that is why so many lives quietly fade into routine. This story begins with a man named Daniel. Daniel was not lazy. He was not stupid. He was not unlucky. He worked hard. He paid his bills. He followed the rules. From the outside his life looked fine. On the inside it felt empty. Every morning Daniel sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee he barely tasted. He stared out the window and felt the same heavy question rise inside him. Is this all there is? He told himself that clarity would come someday. When the timing was right. When he had more money. When he felt confident. When someone noticed his potential. Years passed. Nothing changed. One evening Daniel picked up an old book from a used bookstore. The pages were yellowed. The words were simple. The message hit him like a punch to the chest. The author said that purpose is not found. It is chosen. Daniel had never heard that before. He had been waiting his entire life to be discovered. Waiting for permission. Waiting for certainty. That night something broke inside him. Not loudly. Quietly. He realized the most dangerous enemy he had ever faced was not failure. It was indecision. Napoleon Hill wrote that every achievement begins with a definite decision. Not a wish. Not a hope. A decision. Daniel saw his own reflection in those words. He had been drifting. Working without direction. Living without a declared aim. He thought about the people he admired. They were not more talented than him. They were not braver by nature. They had simply decided. Decision was the missing ingredient. The next morning Daniel woke up before the alarm. Nothing magical had changed. The room looked the same. The world was still uncertain. But something inside him was different. For the first time he asked himself a new question. Not what should I do, but who will I become? Hill taught that the mind must be directed or it will wander. A wandering mind builds nothing. A directed mind creates destiny. Daniel took out a notebook and wrote a sentence that scared him. I decide to live with purpose. He did not know exactly what that meant yet. And for once he stopped pretending he had to. This is where most people quit. They wait until the path is clear. They wait until fear disappears. They wait until success feels guaranteed. Hill warned against this trap. He called it the habit of drifting. Drifting is living without aim. Drifting is reacting instead of creating. Drifting is letting circumstances decide your future. Daniel saw how deeply drifting had shaped his life. He had chosen comfort over courage. Safety over significance. That day he made another decision. Small but powerful. He decided to move. Not perfectly. Not confidently. But deliberately. Hill believed that action activates faith. Not the other way around. Daniel chose one direction that pulled at him. Helping people grow. Teaching. Sharing ideas. Was it the final answer? He did not know. But he knew something more important. Standing still was no longer an option. That evening fear returned. Fear always does. What if I fail? What if I choose wrong? What if I waste time? Hill answered those fears decades earlier. The only real tragedy is refusing to try. Failure teaches. Indecision destroys. Daniel wrote another line in his notebook. I will learn as I go. This was the moment purpose began to form. Not as a feeling. As a commitment. Hill taught that faith grows through repeated action taken despite doubt. Confidence is earned, not granted. Daniel stopped waiting to feel ready. He accepted that readiness is built through motion. Days passed. He read. He practiced. He shared ideas even when his voice shook. No applause. No instant success. But something powerful happened. The emptiness began to fade. Purpose was not lighting his path far ahead. It was lighting the next step. Hill called this the law of clarity through action. The universe responds to movement. Daniel understood something most people never grasp. Purpose is a direction, not a destination. You choose it. Then you walk. Every great life begins this way. Not with certainty, but with courage. Daniel was no longer asking for permission. He gave it to himself. This is the first law of purpose. Decision precedes discovery. Until a person decides who they are and what they stand for, the world will decide for them. In the next part of this story, Daniel will face resistance. From others. From fear. From his own old habits. Because once you stop drifting and start directing your life, the tests begin. But this is how greatness is formed, not through comfort, through commitment. And it all begins with one moment, one choice, one decision made without guarantees. The same decision waits for you now. Part 2 will reveal the second law of purpose and why most people turn back when the path demands belief before proof. Here is Part 2, written as a Napoleon Hill inspired motivational story, simple American English, strong hook first, story driven, no dashes used, and focused on self-knowledge as the second law of purpose. Most people are afraid of silence, not because silence is empty, but because silence tells the truth. This part of the story begins months after Daniel made his first decision to stop drifting. On the outside, his life looked the same. Same job, same routine, same responsibilities. On the inside, something uncomfortable had started to grow. Daniel was moving now, reading, learning, trying new things. But the more he moved, the clearer one truth became. Movement without self-knowledge creates noise, not clarity. One evening, Daniel turned off his phone. No music. No television. No distractions. He sat alone at his kitchen table and felt something he had avoided for years: discomfort. Napoleon Hill wrote that self-analysis is the foundation of all achievement. Without it, a man builds his life on borrowed ideas and borrowed values. Daniel realized he had never truly asked himself what he wanted, not what looked good, not what paid well, not what earned approval. What he wanted when no one was watching. That question scared him. So he avoided it. Like most people do. Hill warned that people stay busy to avoid thinking. They fill their days with activities so they never have to face themselves. Daniel saw his old habits clearly now. Work, scroll, sleep, repeat, no wonder life felt hollow. That night he opened his notebook and wrote a question at the top of the page. What do I truly value? The pen hovered in his hand. No easy answers came. He realized something painful. Most of his choices had been reactions, not decisions. He chose safety because it was expected. He chose stability because it was praised. He chose approval because it felt safer than honesty. Hill called this living under the influence of other minds. Daniel had been living someone else's plan. Over the next few days he began a new practice. Each morning he sat in silence before the world could speak to him. No news. No messages. Just thought. He asked himself questions that had no quick answers. What excites me so much that I forget the time? What problems in the world make me feel restless? What would I pursue if failure was impossible? At first his mind resisted. It offered practical answers, safe answers. But slowly deeper truths surfaced. He remembered being young and explaining ideas to friends, helping them understand, watching their eyes light up. He remembered feeling alive when teaching, sharing, guiding. That memory had been buried under years of practicality. Hill wrote that buried desires never die, they wait. Daniel also faced uncomfortable truths. He admitted that some goals were not his own. They belonged to his parents, his peers, society. He had chased money not because he loved it, but because he feared being judged without it. This honesty hurt, but it also felt freeing. Hill believed that courage begins with truth, not positive thinking, not motivation. Truth. Daniel began to understand the second law of purpose. You must know yourself before you can direct yourself. Without self-knowledge, a man can be successful and still feel lost. Daniel saw people around him who had status but no peace, money but no meaning. External success without internal alignment is empty. One afternoon, Daniel met an old coworker for lunch. The man had everything Daniel once wanted: title, income, recognition, yet his eyes looked tired. He said something that stayed with Daniel. I did everything right and I still feel wrong. That sentence confirmed what Hill taught. Achievement without alignment creates quiet misery. Daniel went deeper into self-study. He started journaling every night. What energized me today? What drained me? When did I feel most like myself? Patterns appeared. Certain activities gave him energy instead of taking it. Certain conversations lit a fire in him. These were clues. Hill called them signals from the subconscious. Daniel stopped ignoring them. He also faced resistance. Friends questioned his changes. Why are you thinking so much? Why not just be happy? Hill warned that when you change internally, others feel threatened. Your growth reminds them of their own stagnation. Daniel learned to accept this without anger. Authenticity is not popular, but it is powerful. As weeks passed, his confidence grew quieter but stronger. Not loud, not arrogant, Grounded. He no longer needed constant approval. He began approving himself. Hill wrote that the man who knows himself cannot be controlled by the opinions of others. Daniel felt this truth deeply. He was not finished discovering his purpose, but now he was aligned. Direction was replacing confusion. Purpose was no longer a distant mystery. It was forming through self-honesty. He understood that purpose is not invented. It is uncovered, buried beneath fear, buried beneath conditioning, buried beneath the need to fit in. Daniel also learned that this work never ends. Self-knowledge is a practice, not a moment. Each day requires reflection, adjustment, truth. But the reward was clear. Life no longer felt borrowed. It felt owned. This is the second law of purpose. Know yourself before you direct yourself. Without this law, action becomes scattered. With it, action becomes powerful. In the next part of the story, Daniel will learn the third law of purpose, the law of faith and belief. Because knowing who you are is not enough. You must believe in that person before the world ever does, and that belief will be tested. Fear does not announce itself as fear. It introduces itself as reason. That is the trap. This part of the story begins the moment Daniel realized something unsettling. Even though he knew himself better now, even though his direction was clearer, he was still hesitating. Not because he did not know what to do, but because he was afraid to do it. Napoleon Hill warned that fear is the most subtle enemy of purpose. It hides behind logic. It disguises itself as caution. It pretends to protect you while quietly imprisoning you. Daniel felt this truth deeply. Every time he thought about stepping fully into his purpose, a voice appeared. What if you fail? What if people laugh? What if you are not good enough? The voice sounded intelligent, convincing, responsible. But it was fear. One night Daniel sat alone and asked himself a hard question. What has fear already cost me? The answer hurt. Missed chances. Unspoken ideas. Dreams postponed until someday. Hill wrote that fear steals more dreams than failure ever will. Daniel began to notice something else. When he ignored his inner voice, his energy dropped. When he moved toward it, even slightly, he felt alive. The soul knew the way. The mind argued. Hill believed that intuition is the voice of accumulated wisdom. It speaks quietly. Fear speaks loudly. Daniel decided to listen to the quieter voice. But listening was not enough. Action was required. This is where the third law of purpose revealed itself. You must master fear or it will master you. There is no middle ground. Daniel understood that fear would never disappear. Waiting for fear to leave was waiting forever. So he changed the goal. Not to eliminate fear, but to act anyway. Hill taught that courage is developed through habit. Small acts repeated daily. Daniel started small. He spoke up in meetings when his heart raced. He shared ideas publicly even when doubt followed. He took steps he had avoided. Each time fear screamed. Each time he moved anyway. Something unexpected happened. Fear began to shrink, not because it vanished, but because it was no longer obeyed. Daniel learned that fear grows when avoided and weakens when challenged. He also learned a powerful truth. Fear is not a sign to stop. It is a signal of growth. Everything he wanted lived on the other side of discomfort. Hill called fear a gatekeeper. Only those willing to pass through are rewarded. Daniel stopped asking how to avoid fear. He asked how to move with it. This shift changed everything. Fear lost its authority. Then another challenge appeared. Failure. Daniel tried something bold and it did not work. No applause. No success. The old fear returned. See? This is why you should not try. But Hill's words echoed in his mind. Every failure carries the seed of equal or greater benefit. Daniel examined the failure honestly. He learned, adjusted, moved again. Failure was no longer an enemy. It was a teacher. This freed him. When fear of failure died, action became easier. Daniel also faced fear of success. What if I change? What if people expect more? What if my life no longer fits the old version of me? Hill warned that fear of success is just fear of responsibility. Daniel decided that growth was worth the cost. This decision marked a turning point. He was no longer controlled by feelings. He acted first. Feelings followed. Confidence grew from proof, not from thinking. Hill taught that belief is strengthened by evidence created through action. Daniel now had evidence. He could act while afraid. He could fail and survive. He could grow. Then the fourth law of purpose emerged quietly. Habits decide destiny. Daniel noticed that his biggest changes did not come from big moments. They came from daily choices. What he read, what he practiced, what he avoided. Hill believed that habits are thoughts made permanent. Daniel audited his habits. Some supported his purpose. Some worked against it. Late nights of distraction drained him. Morning reflection energized him. Comfort weakened him. Discipline strengthened him. He chose deliberately. Small daily actions replaced dramatic promises. Writing every day. Learning consistently. Serving others through his strengths. No excitement. No drama. Just discipline. Hill taught that persistence is the number one requirement for success. Daniel learned patience. Purpose was not a burst of inspiration. It was a process. Days felt ordinary. Progress felt slow. But weeks later something shifted. Momentum. Fear no longer stopped him. Habits carried him forward even when motivation faded. This was the secret most people never learn. Motivation is unreliable. Habit is unstoppable. Daniel stopped waiting to feel inspired. He showed up. Regardless. Hill called this definiteness of purpose backed by organized habits. Daniel now understood why most people fail. They rely on feeling. They abandon the process. Purpose rewards consistency. Daniel also learned to visualize success, not as fantasy. As preparation. Hill taught that the mind moves toward what it consistently imagines. Daniel saw himself calm, confident, living aligned. This mental picture guided his actions. Fear still appeared, but it no longer ruled. Daniel had changed, not overnight, but permanently. This is the truth few accept. Courage is built. Fear is trained. Purpose is practiced. This is the third and fourth law of purpose combined. Master fear. Master habits. Without them, self-knowledge remains unused. In the next part of the story, Daniel will face the fifth law of purpose. The law of persistence and faith when results do not appear. Because the greatest test of purpose comes not at the beginning, but when progress feels invisible. And that is where most give up. Most people quit right before everything changes. Not because they are weak, not because they are incapable, but because they mistake silence for failure. This part of the story begins at the most dangerous stage of Daniel's journey. The stage where effort is high and visible results are low. Daniel had changed his habits. He faced fear. He acted daily. He lived with intention. Yet nothing dramatic had happened. No breakthrough. No sudden success. No public reward. And doubt returned wearing a new mask. Maybe this is not working. Napoleon Hill warned that this is where dreams quietly die. Not in chaos. In discouragement. Daniel woke one morning feeling heavy. The excitement he once felt had faded. The work felt repetitive. The progress felt invisible. He considered slowing down, just for a while. That thought scared him more than failure. Hill wrote that persistence is sustained effort backed by faith, not faith in results. Faith in direction. Daniel realized he had been measuring progress the wrong way. He was watching the surface. Purpose grows underground. Like a seed. No one sees the roots spreading. But without them nothing ever rises. Daniel remembered the oak tree image that once moved him. Years pass before strength appears. But the tree is growing the entire time. He asked himself a new question. Am I willing to continue even if no one notices? That question revealed the truth. Purpose is not proven by applause. It is proven by persistence. Hill taught that most people stop one step before success because they mistake delay for defeat. Daniel refused to make that mistake. But faith was tested again. A project he believed in failed publicly. Criticism followed. Silence followed. The old voice returned. You were foolish to believe. This time Daniel responded differently. He opened his notebook and wrote a sentence that would become a turning point. I will not quit simply because the harvest is delayed. Hill believed that faith grows strongest in adversity, not when things are easy, when they are uncertain. Daniel chose to stay committed without evidence. This decision changed something inside him. He stopped checking outcomes daily. He focused on showing up. Hill called this burning desire backed by persistence. Daniel also learned another truth. Purpose attracts resistance. The moment you commit fully, obstacles appear, not to stop you, but to shape you. Daniel noticed that each setback forced him to refine. Improve. Deepen his understanding. Failure was not pushing him away from purpose. It was pushing him deeper into it. Hill taught that every adversity carries a seed of equal or greater benefit. Daniel began to look for the seed instead of cursing the soil. Slowly confidence returned, not loud confidence. Quiet certainty. The kind that does not depend on validation. He learned to trust process over mood, commitment over comfort. Some days felt inspired. Most days felt ordinary. Purpose does not require constant excitement. It requires consistency. Daniel also learned to guard his mind carefully. Hill warned that doubt spreads through association. Negative voices weaken persistence. Daniel became selective. What he listened to, who he allowed close, not out of arrogance, out of discipline. Faith is fragile in early stages. It must be protected. He fed his mind daily with belief, books, reflection, visualization. Hill taught that the subconscious accepts what is repeated with emotion. Daniel imagined success not as fantasy but as certainty delayed. This strengthened him. Months passed. Then, something subtle happened. Opportunities appeared. Not dramatic. Small. A conversation. An invitation. A chance to contribute. Daniel recognized them immediately. Hill wrote that opportunity often comes disguised as ordinary events. Because Daniel was persistent, he was ready. He acted. One small success followed another. Nothing viral. Nothing overnight. But momentum began to build. The silence broke. Daniel understood why most people never reach this stage. They quit during the quiet. Purpose requires the ability to walk alone for a while. To believe without proof. To persist without praise. This is the fifth law of purpose. Persistence fueled by faith. Faith is not belief without doubt. Faith is action despite doubt. Daniel no longer questioned whether his path was right. He questioned only whether he would remain committed. That commitment became unshakable. He stopped asking when. He focused on how well. Hill believed that the mind that refuses to quit eventually commands success. Daniel also learned patience. Purpose unfolds on its own timeline. Rushing it creates frustration. Trusting it creates peace. He accepted that growth is uneven. Progress is nonlinear. Some days move mountains. Some days move inches. Both matter. By staying persistent, Daniel became something more valuable than successful. He became resilient. This resilience changed how others saw him. But more importantly, how he saw himself. He was no longer someone chasing purpose. He was someone living it, even before external results fully arrived. This is the secret few understand. Purpose is felt before it is seen. In the next part of the story, Daniel will face the final transformation. The sixth law of purpose. The law of contribution and legacy. Because true purpose is never about self alone. It is about service. And when a person aligns their gifts with the needs of others, life responds in ways logic cannot explain. That is where the journey leads. The moment you stop asking what you can get, life begins asking what you can give. That is the moment everything changes. This part of the story begins when Daniel noticed something unexpected. The more committed he became to his purpose, the less it felt like it was about him. At first this confused him. He had started this journey to escape emptiness. To find meaning. To feel alive. But now the satisfaction he felt came from somewhere deeper. Napoleon Hill wrote that true success is never selfish. It grows out of service. Daniel began to see a pattern. Whenever he focused only on his own progress, frustration crept in. Whenever he focused on helping others grow, energy returned. This was not coincidence. Purpose matures when it moves beyond self. Daniel remembered something Hill emphasized repeatedly. The greatest rewards come to those who render more service than they are paid for. Daniel tested this idea. He shared knowledge freely. He mentored without expecting return. He contributed ideas simply because they mattered. At first nothing happened. Then something powerful occurred. People began seeking him out, not because he promoted himself, but because his work carried sincerity. Hill believed that influence grows naturally from contribution. Daniel was no longer trying to prove his worth. He was expressing it. This shift removed pressure. Purpose felt lighter, more natural. Daniel understood something essential. Purpose is not about standing above others. It is about lifting others up. The moment he stopped chasing recognition, recognition found him quietly. He also learned that contribution requires humility. Serving others means listening, learning, adjusting. Daniel paid attention to the needs around him. Not trends, not applause, real needs. Hill taught that opportunity flows to those who solve problems. Daniel began solving problems through his strengths. Teaching, clarifying, encouraging. Each act of service sharpened his purpose. He noticed that the work no longer drained him. It energized him. This was alignment. Hill called this the harmony between desire and action. Daniel also faced another internal shift. Ego faded. He no longer needed to be right. He needed to be useful. This made him stronger. Contribution also brought responsibility. People depended on him now, trusted him. Purpose demands accountability. Daniel honored this by staying disciplined, continuing his habits, protecting his integrity. Hill warned that power without discipline destroys purpose. Daniel remained grounded. He understood that purpose grows through consistency, not spotlight moments. He also learned the power of cooperation. Hill believed that success is rarely individual. It is built through mastermind relationships. Daniel surrounded himself with people aligned in values, not competition, collaboration. Together they grew faster. Purpose multiplied. Daniel realized that contribution creates momentum no strategy can replace. Giving created trust. Trust created opportunity. Opportunity expanded impact. This cycle repeated. Slowly Daniel's life transformed, not dramatically, but meaningfully. Work felt important. Days felt intentional. He was no longer asking if he mattered. He was making himself matter. Hill taught that self-confidence is the result of service well rendered. Daniel felt this deeply. He also noticed something else. Fear lost its grip almost entirely. When your focus shifts from self to service, fear has less space to live. Purpose anchored him. Even setbacks felt manageable, because they were no longer personal. They were part of growth. Daniel understood now why so many people failed to sustain success. They chase it for ego, not impact. Purpose rooted in ego collapses. Purpose rooted in service endures. This realization prepared Daniel for the final stage. Legacy. He asked himself a powerful question. If my work disappeared tomorrow, would it matter? That question sharpened his standards. Daniel wanted his life to leave something behind, not money alone, not titles. Meaning. He'll believe that immortality comes through contribution. Daniel committed to building something that would outlast him, not perfectly, but sincerely. This commitment elevated his purpose. He was no longer building a career. He was building a life of value. This is the sixth law of purpose forming quietly. Legacy begins with service. Purpose reaches its highest form when it stops asking what life owes you and starts asking what you owe life. Daniel was ready for the final lesson. In the next and final part of the story, Daniel will understand how purpose becomes destiny, how daily choices compound into legacy, how an ordinary life becomes extraordinary, not through luck, not through talent, but through conscious living, and that lesson brings everything together. The most powerful moment in life comes when purpose stops being a concept and becomes your destiny. This part of Daniel's journey begins as he looked back on the path he had traveled. Months ago he was confused, unsure, afraid. Now he stood in a quiet confidence that had been earned step by step, habit by habit, act by act. Napoleon Hill wrote that definite purpose, combined with persistence and faith, is the starting point of all achievement. Daniel realized he had reached that starting point, but unlike most, he had walked the path long enough to understand that the starting point is not the end. Purpose is not a trophy to be collected. It is a direction to follow. It is a life to live. Every morning Daniel made choices aligned with his values, his gifts, and the needs of the world. Every day he acted despite fear. Every day he contributed without expectation. Every day he persisted without seeing immediate reward. Over time these small, consistent choices became momentum. Momentum that carried him toward greater confidence, greater impact, and greater fulfillment. Hill emphasized that thought, when combined with definiteness of purpose and backed by action, becomes power. Daniel had tested this principle in every part of his life. He discovered that the life he had always dreamed of was not waiting for him somewhere outside. It had been created by every decision he had made, every habit he had built, every fear he had faced, and every person he had served. This is the transformation most people never see. They wait for luck. They wait for talent. They wait for the perfect conditions. Meanwhile, life passes by. Daniel realized that destiny is not discovered. It is deliberately constructed. By daily action. By courage. By persistence. By contribution. Hill wrote that those who understand this principle do not complain about circumstances. They do not blame others for failure. They look inward. They act outward. Daniel felt a deep sense of freedom. He knew that regardless of external outcomes, he could create meaning and leave impact. This is the power of aligning purpose with action. He remembered all the times fear had tried to stop him, all the times doubt whispered he was not enough, all the moments when failure seemed certain. Each challenge had been a lesson. Each setback had been an opportunity to refine. Each obstacle had been a teacher guiding him closer to mastery. Bill said that adversity often delivers the greatest advantage. Daniel felt that truth in every fiber of his being. He also understood legacy. Purpose is not complete until it extends beyond the self. Every person Daniel had helped, every idea he had shared, every skill he had taught, became part of something larger than him. This is the ultimate reward of living with purpose. Not money, not recognition, not comfort, but influence, impact, contribution. Daniel realized that ordinary people become extraordinary not because of talent or luck, but because they consistently live in alignment with these laws of purpose, decision, self-knowledge, action despite fear, daily habits, persistence and faith, contribution and legacy. All 6 laws working together form a life of unstoppable momentum. Hill wrote that definiteness of purpose is like a rudder on a ship. Without it, the vessel drifts wherever the currents push it. With it, it moves steadily toward the chosen destination. Daniel now understood that his life was no longer about drifting. It was about deliberate navigation. He thought about people he had once envied, the ones he assumed had it easier, the ones he believed were born ready. Now he saw clearly. They had not been luckier. They had not been smarter. They had chosen. They had acted. Daniel felt gratitude, not just for his successes, but for every failure, every fear faced, every habit cultivated, every contribution made. All of it had forged the life he now lived. And the most powerful part of his journey was the realization that this life was available to anyone willing to follow the same laws. Hill's message was timeless. Success is not mysterious. It is a formula. And that formula works for anyone willing to practice it. Daniel wanted to share this truth. To give back. To create more lives aligned with purpose. This is the final stage of purpose, creating a life that inspires others to find theirs. He began writing, speaking, mentoring, sharing the principles that had transformed him. Because purpose reaches its full power when it sparks purpose in someone else. And that is where destiny is born, not in isolation, not in waiting, not in fear, but in action. In contribution. In daily commitment to the values, the vision, and the work that matter most. Now Daniel understood the full circle of purpose. It begins with a single decision. It grows through honesty, courage, and persistent action. It expands through service and contribution. It becomes your destiny when lived fully and shared generously. This is why so few ever reach it. It requires discipline, patience, and faith in yourself when results are invisible. It demands courage when fear whispers louder than reason. It calls for relentless consistency when motivation fades. But the reward is incomparable. Freedom, confidence, impact. A life lived on your own terms. A legacy that outlasts you. Daniel looked at the life he had built and smiled. Not because it was perfect, but because it was authentic. Because every choice had been deliberate. Because he had refused to drift. Napoleon Hill said that the power to achieve anything you desire already exists within you. Daniel finally knew it was true, and so does every person willing to act on these 6 laws of purpose: decision, self-knowledge, courage in the face of fear, daily disciplined habits, persistence with faith, contribution to others. Practice these consistently and your life will change. Not someday, not when conditions are perfect. Now. The life you deserve is waiting for the first step, the first decision. The first act. It has always been waiting, and this is your moment. Take it, move, act, and create the extraordinary life you were born to live. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs it. Comment below with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe for more lessons on purpose, success, and building a life that matters. Your journey begins today.